Well, good morning, everybody, to Friday Focus and to the end of this autumn term. So this afternoon's, this morning, I've written the day off already. This morning's episode is looking at the Great Christmas Read. As educators, we take that time to rest and recoup, and many will spend a lot of time with a good book, either on a tablet or the old-fashioned paper-based book. But just thank you for being here, and our focus today is on some books. Look, today is almost exactly 6 months of the Friday Focus. I just want to thank people for joining us and being here, either watching live or watching after as a recording. We've been reaching something like 1,500 people an episode, which is amazing to me, but a great opportunity that's there on LinkedIn. So if you're watching on LinkedIn, please like and share and comment. You know that I like to bring in people's comments as we go through, and as we look at the books this morning, I'm sure there will be things to say. If you've got your own suggestions, please add them to the list, and we'll post that with the ones that we've picked out to look at. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, Smart Curriculum Network. Search us on YouTube if you haven't done so. We're trying to build our subscriber base there to get some of the messages out. And if you're on YouTube, you'll know that there are shorts that we've been running that are growing some traction. So please like, share, subscribe, and comment as we go through this morning. I'd just like to introduce my friend and colleague who we've chatted before, and Andrew Fell. I'm bringing onto the stage. Morning, Andrew.
Good morning.
It's great to have you here. We've just been sort of talking about the term, and it's a tough environment at the moment out there, isn't it?
Very much so, and I'm in deepest, darkest Suffolk, as you can see, in the doom and gloom. And it's been a long term. It's been a long term in schools, certainly in England. The weather, all of the things that are going on around funding, around uncertainties. So yes, coming to the end of a long term, the opportunity of a break ahead is great, with some opportunities to do some reading, which is what we're here to talk about, Chris.
Absolutely, and it is a good opportunity to stop and read. So just if you've got a chance, and then speaking to as someone, I mean, as a youth, I was not a great lover of reading, but I've certainly changed my mindset and worked hard on it. So wherever you are on the reading journey, I know Andrew consumes books, and I do now myself, but that's it's a choice, and so this is about refreshing our thinking, changing our thinking, and taking the opportunity to look at some of the material out there and some people's thoughts. So thanks for being here. Now let's get into it. So Andrew, you're gonna lead on the first book. Tell us about this book and why you've chosen it.
Yeah, this is a short book, and so I know there's sometimes intimidating when you see these educational tomes that can hold the kitchen table up. This is a short book by a philosopher, a writer, a thinker called Gert Biester. The book was introduced to me by a great friend of mine, Giles Barrow. I mean, we talk a lot about the purpose in education, and the reason why I suggested this book, that a good education in the age of measurement, it's for me, there's, and people will know me, there's lots of what I call edutainment. There's lots of snippets and bites about the how of teaching. I think we're flooded with how to do this, how to do that, how to be a great teacher. And the second question we often talk about is the what. Chris and I are, I would say, curriculum addicts. We talk all the time about curriculum, about what we teach. And I guess for me, as a great friend of mine said, teaching is a postgraduate profession. Why do we do it? And I'm sure in every school we've got, we want children to reach their potential, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We know all that. But have we dug into the question of why we we teach, what we teach, and how we teach it. Not a sort of long extracted philosophy of education, but if you want something to challenge you about, well, why am I doing this? What do we mean by a good education? And particularly at the moment, and particularly when it is written about, we're obsessed with measuring what we think a good education is. And BESTA will challenge your thinking about what you determine a good education, because surely that is the fundamental cornerstone about the reason we get up at in the cold, dark mornings in Suffolk. So I would very much recommend it. It's relatively straightforward to read, although it is compact. But if you want some time to think, you know, over the holidays about, well, why am I actually doing this? Whether you're a leader, whether you're a teacher, whether you want to become one or two of those, or just curious about the business of schooling in general. So yeah, I'd strongly recommend this with anybody on their journey in terms of education.
I would say, you know, it's one of those books that leaders really ought to get their head into, because we've talked, and obviously we do, as Andrew's just said, we talk a lot about curriculum. We come back to the Simon Sinek stuff of start with why, and that really is, you know, why are we doing stuff? We don't do it just because it's measurable or it's easy to measure. We should be doing it because it's the right thing to do. And I think that sounds and resonates strongly in the work that we do. So Andrew, it's a good one to kick off with. It's not a new book.
It's a great start.
Yeah, absolutely. Now look, the second book that we've picked, and what I should say is I've put on the screen all the details, and obviously a lot of people are buying it from Amazon. If you can buy it from a local seller, a local bookshop, then all the better. Amazon is so easy to achieve, but it's a good place to get the resource. So all the details are there on the screen, and we'll do a summary at the end. It's been around for about 13 years, so it isn't new, but it is good thinking. It's great thinking, Andrew. Yeah,
absolutely.
Now, interesting, and again, this is probably the fact that we talk a fair bit, Andrew. The second book that we both picked. So I asked Andrew to come up with sort of 5 books, and we both talked about, or we've referred to this book. In fact, I think, do you remember going to the education show?
Yes.
And we actually saw these two as they were presenting it. So Tim Brighouse, the late Tim Brighouse, and
it's poignant. Yeah.
Andrew, from your point of view, what is? I mean, this is a tome, isn't it? I mean, it's I've got it here, so it's no small read. It's a significant sized book. What's your take as we go into this book?
Yeah, and it's, you're right, Chris. It's the opposite. This will hold the kitchen table up, and it's long, and it's not one for reading one go. For me, and it's all about the long view, the sort of the position of schooling. It doesn't come about from nothing, and I think I find it really interesting, and to understand the structures and the way schools are at the moment, really to look back and understand how we got here, and understanding how we got here, I think is really important, because it explains certain things that happen in schools the way that they do, certainly in England and Wales. And for me, it's quite interesting. I've been a head teacher around a little while, and simple things. There's obviously teachers coming into the teaching profession that have known nothing else other than academies, nothing else other than multi-academy trusts, nothing else other than even the national curriculum. And Chris, when we started, there was no national curriculum. Right. There was no academies. So there was no Ofsted when we were there, when we started. So all of these structures, which are a given now, I think for all of us, certainly for me, it's quite interesting seeing the arc of where things have developed. But for anybody in schools, just understanding the framework by how we got here, I think is is again really informative to us as educators. So that's why, Chris, sort of how we got here.
And a sad loss to the profession. Obviously, Tim Brighouse passed away during this last year. So and many educators were involved in celebrations of his life when that happened. But I think we'll come to another one in a second. But this is a fitting. It's almost it captures all of the things that the two of them were involved in the process. I mean, obviously, I remember Mick Waters as leading the QCA, so he's very involved in curriculum, and at a time I got involved in that, in terms of the guided learning hour conversations and the setting the shape and size of qualifications back in sort of the early 2000s. To me, the thing that stands out for me, and if you've got the book, on the front cover, it brilliantly, artistically created, is a list of all the people that they've spoken to. It isn't just two great people sharing their mind. It's actually the product of a whole plethora of interviews with people that have been involved in the education process. And it taught, the commentary from, I think they refer to about 14 secretaries of state, going, when I started, it was Keith Joseph, and just before that, I think that's where they were in the sort of early mid 80s. But the number of people that are talking, and they cover, you think, I mean, the characteristic of leading schools is, Andrew, and many that are listening or watching will know your day is a variety and the extremes of human existence and human education. So it's everything from pedagogy and what's going on in the classroom and how we can do it better, to data and how we capture it, talk about it, monitor it, through to safeguarding issues and child welfare and staff welfare, and then pay and signing off a budget, and it's everything. And there's these two people who've been at the top of the profession and seen it all and been involved in the London Challenge and the development of qualifications. They take, exactly as you say, a long view, but also a high view, looking down on the provision and how all of the elements fit together. I think if you're going to get into school leadership, it's the kind of book that's almost a must, because it touches on so many things. Andrew, go on.
Yeah, Chris. Yeah, I was going to say that sometimes we can, as leaders and teachers, feel isolated from the profession. And I think looking at that book reminds us how we connect into a really important social good. Sometimes as teachers and as leaders and educators, we do get mired in the detail of the small things within schools. But actually, we are part of a component, an important part of a really, really critical part of our social good. So I think being reminding ourselves of being in a school, working in a schools, we are part of this important service. And I just think, we should be proud of ourselves as teachers, educators, that we are part of this long history of schooling and doing a really important job. So yeah, I think it's as I say, it's not a short read. You can dip in and out of it, though. You don't need to read it from one to the end. It's very, reading interviews, snippets. So yeah. Certainly recommend that.
And there are some I would recommend. I mean, certainly that's how I've read it. There's a topic that I want to get into, something that we want to look at, and it's not just always, it's not all back looking. There are projections of where they see the profession going, and I think certainly the two of them, when we heard them talking, were talking about, well, what could it be, and what the future opportunities are. So it isn't just a kind of historical summary of two people that have been in education for a lot of years and gone white in the process. It is a book that's saying, learn from this. I mean, it's subtitled "Improving from the Previous Best." It is a book that's looking forward and saying, yes, we could be doing this and we could be doing that, and here's an opportunity. So I fully recommend, and I'm glad we both picked it.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that down and hope it doesn't fall off the table, because it is a big book. I look, following on from that, the one that I would like to recommend is the kind of follow on from it, and it's actually written in a very similar style. It's a life tribute to Tim Brighouse, Sir Tim Brighouse. You can see from the screen, edited by David Cameron, Steve Mumby, and Mick Waters again. But it's another book that's a collection of a number of people that he was involved in, and it's a good follow-on from About Our Schools, and it looks at the whole plethora of subjects, talking to a number of people that were involved in his life, and the colleagues, ministers, David Blunkett, Estelle Morris, and others. I found it a refreshing read, but again, it's got that feel. If you want something that's a little shorter, and you perhaps want to, I mean, if you like autobiographies, I happen to like autobiographical elements. This is a great book to get into over the Christmas period. I thoroughly recommend it to you. It's a great read. It's been put together very well. And it covers, it's a kind of related book to the last one, and it covers so much of the teaching profession and what things could be. Now, it's called Unfinished Business because he really goes, or what it covers is the opportunities that are there for all of us in the profession, and some of the sort of the life experiences that that Tim brings to the table, and many that are involved in senior leadership in the education world, whether that's trust or local authority level, touched on the life and experience of Sir Tim as he sort of went about his business. So again, it's got a call to action. There are things in it, and I think back to that occasion that we that you and I listened to, him and Mick just talk, and it was all, it wasn't desperation, but there was some really, this is an important age. There are things that we need to do because we're going down a path where, well, I'll come back to your first book. We got so worked up about measurement that we're losing the reason.
Andrew,
I think
also, yeah, Chris, I think in terms of the quality of and the thinking of Tim is outstanding to get into, to understand. I also, maybe it is my age, but sort of worry about, where is the next cohort of this quality of thinking coming from? And I know that's always the older generations worry about the younger one, but these sort of grand titans of education thinking of certainly Tim and Mick of that era, that we've got to ensure that this sort of legacy of thinking, legacy of experience is passed on. It's sort of incumbent of our generation, Chris, to make sure that this quality of thinking, this quality of experience is passed on, and no better way than to read it, autobiographies or biographies of great people. It's like Great Lives on Radio 4, which I'm sure we listen to sometimes. It is that about how do we pass the baton on to the next generation and the next generation, so we can learn from it, so we don't become in sort of repeating the mistakes. And my worry is that we begin to repeat the mistakes of the early 2000s. I mean, we can get quite political about it, but I think it's about learning again from not just from the past, but from great thinkers. So yeah, I haven't read it, Chris, but I definitely will be trying to in the over the Christmas holidays.
Yeah, sorry, go on, finish. Go on.
Well, particularly the significant thing, when you and I heard the two of them speak, there's a sort of closure to that, isn't there? So yeah, no, that's a lovely choice, Chris.
And there's I just thinking, Andrew, as we're talking, I know I'm not going to preempt some of the books coming forward, but there's almost there's a link and to those elements. I mean, what you just said about taking the opportunities of the moment, just do it. I know we'll come to the older book in a little while, but there's some kind of there's some things and principles that don't change, and exactly what you're referring to is that we need some big thinkers that are willing to look at the opportunities and to see where things are moving. And it's not, I just, as I was listening to you there, Andrew, I was just thinking it isn't all about AI and replacing, because that's such a big thing at the moment that so many people are talking about. There's just simple teaching is the human connection of one generation with the next, and opening the doors to all the opportunities that are there. And that's the thing that gets, so are we teaching our young people and our young teachers to think the big things? And that's the challenge, isn't it? So what could it be? What is it? Not just doing the same things, but moving forward.
Really interesting. And Chris, if there's time, a little anecdote on that. Have we got time for just a very?
Yeah, go on. Yeah, we're doing okay for time. So yeah.
I was working in a school 2 weeks ago with the new head of drama, and fantastically talented young teacher, just bright, clever, really a practitioner, emotionally intelligent, all the components. And she wanted to talk to me about curriculum development, and her scheme of work and the drama curriculum. So we sat down with a sort of blank piece of paper. I said to her, she had the scheme mapped out from year 7 to GCSE, all of it. And I'm saying, well, why are we teaching drama? And she said, well, we're teaching drama to deliver these skills so they can develop the next set of skills so they can go on and I said, no, let's just pause there a second. Can we just step back, that one step back about why are we doing this? Why are we developing these skills? Why is it important that young people in your school are exposed to drama at year 7, year 8, year 9? And it was an obvious question to ask, and clearly she understood the question very quickly, but because she hadn't necessarily been exposed to the steps that before then, it was very operational, her understanding of curriculum, her understanding of why we do things. Well, because it serves a function to enable the children to learn this so they can learn the next bit so they can get their GCSE. And very quickly, as you would expect, she really got into the why. But it is about needing to continually repose those questions about why we're doing it in the broad and deep question. So yeah, it was a sort of real example of what we're talking about, Chris. This isn't a sort of abstract thought experiment that we do about teaching. This is practical work we need to do with leaders, teachers and children and parents about why are we doing this. And we'll come on to the alleged social contract, the breaking of the social contract. But I do a lot of whole school, across school and national work around attendance. And I hear over and over again the social contract is broken between families and schools in terms of sending, why attendance rates have slipped so much. Well, perhaps what we haven't been good enough at as educators is explaining why we do things, why it's important to come to school. We spend a lot of time saying, if you come to school, you'll get better GCSEs, of course. But why else? Or why? Why is it so important that children have 97% attendance compared to 93? Are we really that data focused that we can't articulate a why to not just our profession and our why to our families? And we go back to Biesta, which I will always do. Maybe we need to articulate to parents, not just to educators, the reasons for what we understand a good education. And then we'll pull parents back into school with their children as opposed to pushing them into school, which again has been the sort of main strategy over the last few years. If we can just push more kids in, how about pulling them in because it's a good education? Anyway, I can
No,
dive. Yeah.
Andrew, I think that it's important for listeners, and if anyone wants to comment on that, that's you've been involved with the official process, and you're kind of at the centre of that conversation, and I'd like immensely that the way that you articulate that in the sense of the pushing and the pulling, we need to give people reason to come to school, not just the accountability that they are at school. In fact, it was I think Ross McGill posted something last night that was saying, we got all this data, but the one thing we have no data on is how many children are being homeschooled. I said 10 years ago we were going to see an increase in homeschooling, and that we have, and it's about we've not been articulating the why. And I think it's really interesting that you pick the example of drama, because in our national curriculum in England, drama is not part of Key Stage 3. The reason for a lot of people is, well, we teach drama because there's a GCSE. That comes back to the Batista idea that it's not just about measurement. Just because we can measure it, that's not a reason to do it. It's there.
Yeah.
And we go to Robinson, and all the he was a drama teacher, and a lot of what he was about was the creative opportunity, the expression, the language development, oracy, and I'm sure that conversation that you had was all about those things and more, and confidence building and teamwork and so on.
Well, it's interesting because the drama teacher had inherited a drama curriculum that was a surrogate English curriculum, and I was saying, well, is the drama curriculum there just to serve the English curriculum, or is there something in itself around exposing young people to drama, both in terms of practice, in terms of experiences? And she said, well, yeah, but that's what I really want to do. But I've been told I just have to deliver the speaking and listening component to the English curriculum. I said, no. You need to say, and of course she was away. But if we scale up, not from drama, but we scale up to one school, to a schooling system, perhaps we haven't articulated. Well, I know we haven't articulated the why. So lots of families, we know that severe absence is chronic in children from deprived backgrounds and children with special educational needs. There's an undisputed correlation in the data sets between those demographics. So we know deprived children from difficult backgrounds and children with additional needs don't attend to school very much. And perhaps it's because they don't think it's important, or we haven't, but yeah, well, there's a whole other podcast on attendance in its broad sense, isn't there, Chris?
Yeah. Oh well, yeah. So we're doing inclusion, and at the moment, a lot of the conversations in Friday Focus have been around inclusion. But there are many other things to come to. But I think they actually comes back to about our schools and the kind of structure of it. They all interrelate. They're all part of the same message. If we want to be well educated, you've got to turn up, but they've got to be reason, and then there's personalization and the differences of children and what they want. Actually, I will drop in. It's interesting, you said about, so that drama curriculum and how, it is part of the national curriculum English, and that may be why that's there. But what an opportunity we're missing. And we've talked before about, where do we teach cultural competency and the language that actually all of the good planning that's done in that is all about role play, and it's a great place to do it. And not to say that that's all that drama should be, but it's certainly a place that can exist, and there'll be more on that to follow, because that's part of some other things that I want to pull together. Andrew, let's get into the next one if we may, because otherwise we're going to run out of time. So this one's your pick. So
it would be sort of remiss, really, and there's me talking about the why all the time, but we also need to talk about the how, and I worry that there's too much, without sort of being disrespectful to current authors about how to do this, how to teach like this, how to, if we can boil it down to 7 steps, playbooks here, and I'm a great advocate of Hattie's work around demonstrating what does work, But this, I found, this book, The Effective Teaching by Daniel Muge, and apologies if I mispronounce his name, and David Reynolds. If you want, I think both of those authors, they're really well informed, active researchers into the quality of teaching. I think clearly and obviously there is a place for books, research into improving the quality of teaching, and I think this one here, I think it might be the third or the fourth edition. So it's been rewritten and well written, and for those people who want to have a think about their practice, look at examples. There's some interesting questions in it about self-reflection, which is obviously a good idea during times you're away from school. So I like Daniel's work. He's done some really interesting things, and David's work as well. So if you wanted to go to a book to read about quality of teaching, and you've had a bit too much of edutainment and snippets and bits and pieces, then I would recommend that. There are a lot of other books I could recommend around the quality of teaching, how to, but as an exercise in improving the practice, I think that's the one I would choose, Chris, for practitioners and also leaders. It also it's not just secondary; it ranges a whole area, SEND, early years, and it's all about good practice. And sometimes you need confidence in the people who are writing. Like, we've spoken about Tim Brighouse and Mick Waters. I know their work, and I'm confident that they know what they're talking about, these two. So I would, if you want to snuggle up with a how to do, it's not a manual, but it's really good clear thinking about how to improve practice. Yeah,
and again, as the fourth edition, I think there's some additional content in it from previous editions. I was interested to read that it uses some comparisons of some international practice. So it's broadening that view, and I think that it's not just a globalization idea, but there's a lot to be said for looking at how things are being looked at and valued in other places. I was talking to one of the Welsh a Welsh education leader the other day, and actually made an interesting comment or interesting comparison. Said that the English system is centered around the head, and a lot of it is sort of knowledge based, where the rewrite of the Welsh curriculum is about the heart and the requirement of the teachers to, in a sense, reorient their values and how they're again, we come back to the measurement issue, but it's not just about that, because obviously there's still measurement in it. But it left me thinking around, so what are the values of the way that we put schools together, and how's that impacting our kind of dialogue, our communication. So that it's all about effective teaching, and it comes from where we're starting, those start points. So this is a great book to choose and get into if you've got time to do so.
Yeah.
Can I just pause and say, if you're watching us, or if you pick up after the Friday Focus this morning on the 13th of December, please leave a comment. Please dip in and get involved in the conversation around the books. If there's other books that you are interested in or you think would be valuable for folk to read, I know there would be a complete different set of books if we had Mark Orrow Ewing and Emma Tibbets here. So I don't always say that wrong. Mark Orrow Whiting. Apologies, Mark. It's just one of those things that are hard baked in my head. An old friend. If you have got books that you're interested in, please give us an idea of what you're looking at. But again, we recommend these to you for that Christmas read. If you're watching, like, subscribe, and follow us on LinkedIn or on YouTube. Okay, Andrew, it's my next pick.
Yes.
These I'm going to refer to two books here by Bill Lucas. Now, I came across Bill this year at the ASCL main conference, and he was talking about his focus. So this is Professor Bill Lucas, and he's written, and I've got to talk through two, or recommend to you two books. One is the Center Teaching Creative Thinking, and it's followed by the Leadership Playbook. They're a great pair to buy. Now, I in my early teaching career was a design technology teacher. My degree was in design technology, and at that time, that was the sort of the mid 80s, early 80s. We were transitioning from sort of craft in schools to what is now design technology. So the subject that we know, and I can't get away from that as my heritage. That's where I began in that process. But the reason I recommend this to you is that it's not about design technology. Let's just say that. But what he does is, and what he's advocating, is a basis of thinking, which is actually built into the design technology mode of operation. So if you were around at the beginning of design technology development, it was the process of design. Now, my namesake, J. Christopher Jones, is the guy that wrote about design theory, and he was the guy who created this idea of the continuum of design development. And it starts with appreciating the problem. So a clear statement of need. What is it that we're trying to do? Then he moves into ideation. So this idea of, well, analysis first, really get into understand it, then moves into, okay, so what can we do? Now, all of the coaching mechanisms that we've been used to, built on the sort of standard coaching practice. I mean, there is a practice referred to as GROW, which is what's your goal? Restate it. So be clear about it. What are the opportunities and what's the way forward? That's the GROW coaching method, but it's built on this iterative process. So this idea of design technology was actually formalizing creative thinking. And what Bill says is it's not just about arts and crafts. It's not that. It's about how do we teach people to approach any circumstance in a creative sense. It's actually more about being that growth mindset, than it is about the fixed mindset. So it's about the opportunities to think differently, to challenge the way that we do them, which is basically what Andrew and I have been talking about all the way through this. And it's a kind of an approach that we have, rather than getting fixed into one neural pathway, that, you know, we're actually looking at ways and techniques to grow different ideas and approach things differently. You know, somebody has said about leadership when we're appointing staff, that if we buy people, and sorry, that's an expression that we use within the analytics, but if we are employing people that are of a similar mind to ourselves, we open ourselves to the opportunity of groupthink. Everyone thinks the same thing. Actually, in employment processes, it's quite challenging to bring in somebody who thinks quite differently. Why? Because it makes us think differently. It challenges our way ahead. So if you're interested in how do we break the cycle of thinking, I thoroughly recommend to you a book like this. And this is a great one. And it's actually applying to school. The one thing, it's not actually something that I would advocate particularly, but what Bill and his team have done is looked at how we could measure those things. Now, again, given the fact that we've just kind of said it's not all about measurement, but in the classroom position, he starts to think about the process. And actually, I quite like what he's described, because what he says is you're either a beginner, you're developing, you're moving up to the process of excelling. You can be an excelling creative thinker. Get this person in because they're going to give us some ideas. And I remember in the design process, and certainly if you've been involved in any design in industrial sense, that's what we do. We have group around a table, and we'll, okay, so no idea is too silly, no idea is off the table, let's just get ideas out there. And that's how innovation is created. And so I would recommend a book like this if you're in a stuck situation and you want to look at ways of moving forward. Relates to if you've done Strengths Finders or any of those people-oriented sort of characteristic testing, find the person that's great at ideation, because they're the ones that think outside the box. They are the ones that sort of challenge your way forward. Now, the beauty of this set of books is that Bill and his team go on and describe how creative thinking can be embedded in a school, both in the classroom and in your leadership practice, and the things to look for, the things to shape. I think it's a great set of books, and if you want to consider change, it is something that you could read, get into, and then practice throughout your school. And if you're looking for change, this is where I would go. Andrew, have you any thoughts on?
Yeah, no, I would say, Chris, that you and I talk a lot about creativity, and I'm just thinking about really practical examples that you and I are working with the school at the moment, and the bringing external ideas around challenging the existing ways of doing things through that formalized. It's not as sort of chucking everything up in the air, but that sort of challenging of ideas at a leadership level, saying to people, to leaders, yes, there are other ways. There's unintended consequences of things that you do. Let's have a much deeper think about what the opportunities are. So, as you were talking, I think of a very practical example of how we're using that approach in system redesign in schools that we're working with, not just that are teaching creativity within lessons. That's not to diminish it, but yes, and again, Bill Lucas's work has depth, and I haven't seen the leadership book, and again, that's one that I'd be interested in having a look at.
We're here to sort of plant thoughts. We're here to sort of give an impetus to a conversation. We can't take out the paths that we've been on, but it's good to capitalize on those elements, and exactly as you say, we've been challenging those thoughts with some of the schools that we work with, and opportunities to think creatively and think differently about the way we do things. I find one of the things that when I was in leadership and you sat around the round table of that, the local round table, the first question always when we got to that conversation was, what are you doing? Does it work? Can I do it? And it's almost that sort of replicate what everyone else is doing. I used to find that quite difficult. Why would I do it? Because somebody else has done it. Their situation is completely different to mine. Yes, we don't want to get involved in unproven stuff and waste time, but there's also the sense of being an innovator and moving forward. So I recommend them too. So Bill Lucas, Teaching Creative Thinking, which is the kind of child focused one, but the leadership playbook is the one that's let's think about the practice in school. I'm just going to put those to one side. Andrew, the next one. Where are we? Oh yes, right. Where we are now.
Yeah, I think. Well, this is your book, Chris. And I was going to ask some questions around your book. Clearly, I've read your book, and I know your thinking, and I know Smart Curriculum very well. So maybe I'll just ask you a couple of questions, Chris, because clearly I find it extremely interesting. But you would expect me to do that because I work closely with you, Chris. But and I think it's a gap in the market. For me, there's very little about what you're going to talk about out there that is easily readable. The amount of people I come across that don't understand the areas that you cover in this book. So I think it's a must read for leaders it's a must read for aspiring leaders, and also I think it's a good read for teachers to understand the context. So, just Chris, why did you write the book? And then maybe rather than me interrupt you with a secondary question, I think central to the book is this, and they're not opposites, but the balancing what you mean by efficient schooling and what you mean by effective schooling, because I think that ties very much back into what we're beginning. So
yeah,
again, why did you write the book? And then focus on, for me, and I might have misread it, but the sort of central thesis around efficiency and effectiveness in schooling.
yeah, and I'm going to take it. I mean, it's always a challenge when you put your own stuff on the screen, and that's why did I write it? I wrote it because, I mean, following, so way back to 2017, the Conservative government were getting into, efficiency within the system, and we're putting all this money in, and are we getting the right things out? And government-led systems are always going to come down to a compliance model. So, in terms of the state-educated system, we get money as leaders of schools, and we spend that to the betterment of the children that are in our catchment areas, and they get results. And I suppose one of the conversations that I remember having with Lord Agnew was, it's a bit of a postcode lottery in the sense of it's not uniform across the country. I got involved in that sort of, developing. I mean, it's not fair to say I got involved in developing the metrics, because the metrics have existed for years. So this idea of pupil teacher ratio, contact ratio, teacher contact ratio, average class size. I mean, they are facts of schools. But the one thing that I've found in the journey, and this is 15 years of work, is that school leaders almost see it as, well, let's do that, send those numbers off, and then let's just get on with what we do. It's just, it's rudimentary. They don't impact us at all, but nothing to do with the education process. They're just facts, and it's numbers. And I don't do numbers, and I don't like spreadsheets, and that's it. That's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because actually these things are about the core purpose of what we're about in leading schools. So there's this narrative around class size. And, I hear this, we don't like large classes and we'd like smaller classes. But when you ask people to articulate that in a number, they can't give you a number. But then there are conversations around, well, we're trying this and it's successful or it's not successful. Because the state education system is built around, lots of things that have been long-standing in the education process. So building bulletins that build our schools, the number of classrooms that exist, are all based on that calculation. So when we start looking at trying to reduce class sizes, we find very quickly that we haven't got enough rooms to put them in, because we need more classes within a school. Now, those kind of things, what are the limitations? What are the factors? In 15 years of working with schools that are looking to improve the situation and looking to get value for money, I have found some techniques and some processes, and we've turned that into a platform that we sell. And actually, it's a discipline now that I think is important for every school leader to be involved in. I call it curriculum analytics. It's more than just a set of metrics. So I explain the metrics that are in the common parlance of leadership, and explain why some of them are useful and some of them are not. Contact ratio is a great one to get into around staff well-being. Why do we have... Sorry, go on. No.
Oh, yeah. Sorry to interrupt you, because, I do find this eminently fascinating. But certainly when I was a new head, I had the traditional curriculum deputy that would close themselves off from whenever, and all of those mystical numbers they had control of. So class size, contact ratio, all of these things were this sort of dark art, yet they are integral to understanding how this large school operates. And I should understand the implications, as you were saying, about staff well-being. If we shift and change the contact ratio, that means teachers are teaching more or less, which means so. And actually opening that sort of book up to say, actually, no, it's all how a school operates. You know, we need to know as leaders what our teachers are doing, how they're teaching, where they're teaching, for the obvious implications for well-being, but efficiency, financial efficiency, and it's about shining a light on an area of detail that I would guess there's many head teachers who are thinking, you know what, I actually don't know what my contact ratio is. I don't know how my school is really structured, and you know, we talk about creativity and philosophy and things like that, but we're also responsible for how that plays out in the day-to-day working of a school. And I think your book is really helpful, revealing all of that information so leaders can do something with it, not just accept it, challenging it. You know, you've challenged it with schools. I've seen you've challenged it with me. You know, why have you got this amount of teachers doing this amount of teaching in this particular area? You know, what's the purpose?
And that's, I get the reason for the book is when you go, so you know, and I want to relate it to the independent sector, because so this sounds like it's all about state education and state funding, but I'll come to that in a second. But to me, it's about developing deep understanding, because if you've got deep understanding, you can make decisions intelligently. And it might be, Andrew, you know, in some case, you know, I remember conversations with you. It might be that you do increase your staffing in something, but there's a reason for it. Then maybe reorient it in another way. And you know, one of the things that we do with the analytics is that, you know, are you teacher-led or support-led in terms of your profile of employees? And, you know, when I've talked that through with CEOs, it's kind of, well, that's new language. Never heard that before. What do you mean? Well, you know, you've got more TAs than you have teachers. I mean, you know, there may be good reason. And what are they doing? And can you articulate what they're doing? And do you manage and control that in any way? And I would translate that to the independent sector that's not controlled by government funding, but they are controlled by the price of the education to the parents and their expectations and class size. And, you know, the narrative of the efficient school, you know, it's actually written about by the OECD now. There's a massive paper that they did in 2021 on it. And, you know, if you can get hold of it, it's a huge document. But it is a worldwide narrative now about being, you know, that this system needs to be effective. So we are getting educated learners at the end for the investment that we're putting in. You know, I know family members that went through the independent sector and ended up with absolutely no qualifications at all. Is that effective educating? You know, so accountability in the sense for that in the way that there is in the state sector. And we've talked about that, you know, the attendance issues and all of that. So look, the guts of it is to raise the questions, to get people into it so there's a deeper understanding, and to, you know, you know, I've not really covered it because I could talk forever about it, but you know, the idea of efficient, effective, and ethical. No, that's laid together. This is one thing, and there's more to follow because I've got lots more to say and write. Let's move on to the next one. But again, it's an ebook rather than a published book at the moment, and so if you'd like to, Amazon ebook is where you get it. Andrew, we are going to have to speed up a little bit. So this is a little bit light, and for those people who remember J.R. Hartley, I'll explain a J.R. Hartley reference at the end. This book is sort of, it's been in my possession all my life, and I'll explain why. And it's about the teaching of English, and it was published in 1957. And it is such an interesting read in terms of what was important in terms of teaching in the 1950s, training young teachers. This is what new English teachers, this was the set text for English graduates going into teaching. And I'll just read you this one little section. And if you use the word curriculum instead of syllabus, I'm just going to read this little section out. It says, "It is recognized, however, that the success in the teaching of English depends on personal freedoms to work out a syllabus, curriculum, in one's own way, and no attempt is made to draw up a detailed syllabus. In the third section of this book, consideration is given to examinations, the use of auxiliaries such as gramophone, wireless, visual aids, and the library." So
it's really interesting. Two things for me. Firstly, it's talking about the need for professionalism around letting teachers teach and not constraining them. And secondly, in these days of AI and all of that, a similar conversation was how we introduce technology such as the gramophone, the wireless, and visual aids into teaching. A fascinating read. The J.R. Hartley moment. The reason why it's here, because on the front sheet it's my father's book when he trained to be an English teacher, and it says Arthur Barry Hamilton fell, Magdalen College, the 8th of June 1958. So when my dad picked this book up to start his teaching career in 1958, that's what he was reading. He went on to teach for over 40 years and was a head teacher for 30 of those. So it's a book dear to my heart. You might be able to get hold of it. What I would say is create something for the next generation. Create an heirloom for your own family. Create an heirloom for the next generation. I'm not going to give this to any teachers, but I will give this to my children. So create heirlooms and create memories, and you can do that in a lovely way by books.
Absolutely, and I did look to see if we could get hold of a route to get to it. I think you're probably going to be digging around in a second-hand bookshop or one of the sort of legacy book websites that you could get. I've from those processes, but it's not published at the moment. But it's a great thing to have, and I like you, I've got a stack of books that my father passed on, and mother passed on as well from things that they were reading. So yeah, I create a legacy. That's really important. We're getting close to time, Andrew. So I'm gonna. So we wanted to move. I mean that this is one of Andrew's sort of personal books. There are 4 books that I wanted to refer to. Things that. So we've talked about education and education processes. One of those that I'm reading at the moment that I want to say is a cracking read. Roy Stewart was a minister, international minister for some time in the Conservative government. The books, if you read all the reviews around it, and I've read a considerable part of it, I've not finished it quite yet, but I'm getting my way through it, and I will pause over the Christmas to do that. It is a memoir. So it's one of those books to reflect on, but an incredibly educated and worldly wise guy. I don't know if you listen to any of his podcasts, The Rest is Politics, or Understanding Ignorance, or Leading. So they're all Goldhanger podcasts. If you listen to Rory, he has some really interesting perspectives on life. Spent a lot of time in Afghanistan and the Middle East. Very knowledgeable about the area, but from the ground. He worked with the forces over there as a diplomat and as an NGO lead, and then ended up in New York. And he tells the story of the experiences that he had. It's a brilliant memoir. It's very well written. Actually, I think somebody there referred to it at last, a politician who can write. That was the kind of summary of it. But if you're interested in a kind of world politics or world position or sort of views of what's going on at the moment, particularly when we speak now of what's going on in Syria, Rory, actually, the book cover shows him walking, and that's what he did. He decided, in fact, one of the NGO jobs, he just simply put his stuff down, said, I'm done with this, and then just got his backpack and walked. So really, really interesting read. But it's one of those that's I love the sort of Around the World in 80 Days, Michael Palin set of books, going to places. That's the kind of thing that I really enjoy. But so this is a kind of different take on that, and I recommend it to you. So if you haven't read any of his stuff, it really is well placed, articulate, very well described, and talks about the human side of things. So again, I recommend it to you. Andrew, just cutting down your suggestion.
Yeah, the book I've read recently, more like a novella. Read the book before you go see the film. The film's okay, good, but the book is fantastic about Ireland in the mid '80s, Southern Ireland. Just beautifully written, concise, short, condensed. Just the way to. So if you want, you can read it in a couple of hours, or you can read it over a few days. But if you want to give as a present to someone, and if you really want to get an insight to the human condition, this book is beautiful. Film's good as well, but the book is an absolute gem as a stocking filler, or as a gift to someone to create a legacy around reading. It's a lovely book. Couldn't recommend it highly enough.
Very, very readable. Yeah.
Yeah. Very readable. Yeah.
And then finally, I picked up in the week, and I was. I've downloaded it as an Audible book. Now, again, busy lives. I often listen to books in the car, so my Audible is well packed with books. But with some of the stuff that's going on in the world, this was recommended to me, and I've listened to the first part of it, and it's really worth getting into. Of Boys and Men by Richard Reeves. Why modern male is struggling, and it talks about the gap in education. It talks about suicide rate. It talks about, what I was reading something the other day that said, why are 50% of boys liking the Andrew Tate stuff? What is it that people are getting into? And I think as educators, it's one thing, this speaks to it's not about the education of subjects to a qualification at the end. It's what impact we're having socially. And I think this is one thing. I don't think it is all about teaching. I think it's about family, and I think it's about society. I think teachers are too often the kind of butt of solving social problems. But I think this book, and I know just a challenge of we've talked about some of the leadership books and some of the other things that are out there. Certainly what I've read of this so far, I would say get in there. I think it's a conversation to be had. And that one of the schools that I worked with, we were having this conversation about how do you change process. And the solution that we came up with, it's not new, but it's been done, was to create a book club. And the whole staff team were encouraged, not required, they were encouraged to take a book, and then on a Friday morning they had a bacon breakfast, and staff would sit around like a book club and talk about the issues that it was raising. Now they did things like When Adults Change, Everything Changes by his name's gone out of my head for a second. No, I'm going in the flow. This book, I would suggest, is one of those kind of books that you could read as a team and think about what could we do, what could we change, how could we impact this process, because it speaks to this. I mean, we have lots of things around the strategies of closing the gaps between genders. I think there are some structural issues that we're not going to solve without massive change, about assessment and subject matter. But I would suggest it's not necessarily, actually, Andrew, it's not the one I wanted to end with. But again, just thinking about the present, it's a deep book. Maybe that's where I am. But again, I'd recommend to you Of Boys and Men. What I've read of it so far is great. We need to get into it, and I've just sort of referred to a kind of way, an approach. So that's where I would leave it. So we've covered a plethora of books, quite deep ones this time, Andrew. We've quite a few in there that valuable stuff for us to be reading. Any final comment, Andrew? Sorry, let me just get you back on the.
No, I did just my final comment is I did a professional development exercise earlier this year about and it sounds a bit trite, but whatever doesn't matter what you read, just read something. Don't just find out about something. If about teaching, don't just read and avoid just using Instagram as your professional development tool. That's a bit of a trite thing to say, but there's so much good stuff out there, so much good to think about. Also, happy Christmas to everybody. Happy reading, happy Christmas, and thanks for the opportunity, Chris, to share my thoughts.
Absolute pleasure, and I reiterate that. Thanks for 6 months of watching. Thanks for you Gemma is a regular listener, and she says many thanks for your conversation today. It's a pleasure. Go and read some stuff. Go and, but more importantly, get some time with family, loved ones, whoever you're with, friends. Recoup. Take time to re-establish some normality, because the pressure of life can be can drain so much. But take the opportunity to stop, and we'll be back in the new year. And we're continuing some of the work on inclusion, and some guests that are coming along. There's some interesting people. I think we've got people booked up to almost till Easter. But come and join the conversation. Thank you for being involved during this year. It's been great to start and get to this point. Go and do some reading, but get some rest. Thanks, Andrew. Really appreciate it. And we'll catch up soon. All right. Speak soon. Take care.